So this is a little bit of a summary of what I thought might be useful for you to think about, particularly in relation to theory. I think the hardest question in a Viva is what is your contribution to theory and how do you theorize? So I'd like to touch on that. And also those of you who are using qualitative methods might like to look at the Gioia method if you haven't already done that. Because it's very important to evidence how you move from the data, the process. You have to tell and not just show how you reached your findings. So I'm Professor of Healthcare Management and Leadership Development. I'm also head of Business School accreditation. So we all have all these accreditations you see below, including the Small Business Charter. We're being re-accredited next week. And it's our 60th anniversary as a university. So we have a new logo and also a new strapline for the business school itself, opening doors, opening minds, opening futures. So I hope this morning, my 15 or 20 minutes or half an hour or so kind of opens your mind a little bit to alternative ways of thinking or responding to your Viva questions. So really, I want to emphasize the importance of theorizing. I say to students, the end product is you and your ability to frame difficult challenges. So when you graduate, I want to feel that that doctorateness stays with you. It's not because you're researching women in Mexico or entrepreneurship in Outer Mongolia. It's actually your ability to look at problems and to use particular lenses to understand the world. And this process of theorizing is an important competence. And the second one is this particular method that has been very popular and has had some criticism. So this is our founder, Brunel, who was a very famous engineer, entrepreneur himself, and some statues on campus. We have a very nice green campus if you'd like to visit us or haven't already. Okay, so one thing I say to my students when maybe they're tired, perhaps a bit demotivated or wondering, what they're going to do over the next 3 years or so, is actually think of your acknowledgements. So I know we're not in a room together and we're not in a workshop, but maybe you'd like to think through this. So I chaired a panel the other week of one of your students who I think is only 9 months or so into her PhD, but she drafted the acknowledgements and the thank yous and things like that. And I thought that was quite useful. So rather than keep this to the end, I recommend you do this now if you haven't already done it, or soon this year. Who are you grateful for that you've even got the opportunity to do a PhD at Ahlia and with us? What is it that you're thankful for in terms of your colleagues who are supervising you, your fellow students, your friends and family? So perhaps next time when you're having a quiet coffee on your own, you can write, or start to write your acknowledgements, because gratitude, I think, is an important skill to do every day, and that keeps you motivated. So I'm actually going to start a podcast this year with two colleagues, one of whom is CEO of Vitae. And Vitae is responsible for research development in the whole of the UK across all subjects. So at the centre, the focus is you. What are you developing in terms of your skills, knowledge, behaviours, your mindset? Then it's about your research, and then it's about your connections and your networking. So it's fantastic at these symposia that you are networking. It's very important to have dialogues and conversations with others. So today I'm looking particularly at research methods in terms of you and critical thinking and kind of innovation, because sometimes people only think about innovation in terms of perhaps theory or sector, or nobody's studied this in the GCC region before, but actually you can be innovative in methods as well. So I did my PhD at Warwick Business School on strategic leadership. I looked at business school deans, actually of Warwick, strangely enough, and Brunel's building does look quite like Warwick's. So I did my PhD while I was working full time. And I guess the killer question for me as a practitioner moving into the academic world, and I've been a full-time in the academic world for 10 years, although I've taught the MBA at the Open University for a very long time, 30 years, is this question: what is your contribution or potential contribution to theory? That is potentially a killer question. And also, it's great to go off and do interviews, surveys, collect your data, and come up with some findings and discussion, but actually showing the process and validating that and making sure that's rigorous can be quite difficult sometimes. So famously, Kurt Lewin said, there is nothing so practical as a good theory. Theory is nothing to be frightened of. It's something that is useful, that helps you understand this crazy world. And like people like me who wear glasses, or him, he only has two lenses. You can't have lots and lots of lenses. So you may have two or three theories, and that's central theories, or one.
Apologies, Prof. Julie, but we're having trouble seeing your slides.
Oh, are you? There, I can see them. You don't see my slides at all?
No.
I am sharing my screen. Unless you want to share them your end, I have sent them to you.
Okay, we'll give us a moment and we'll try that.
Shall I stop sharing? Yeah. Sorry, if I can stop sharing. Okay, so Kurt Lewin says there's nothing as practical. I'll continue while you're doing that. There's nothing as practical as a good theory. So theory gives you a structure, and it stops you getting lost, I think, in your PhD. So this definition of a theory, it's about relationships between concepts. And theorizing is the process of making sense with these dimensions and concepts. So I guess we all understand perhaps the carrot and stick theory. If I give you more carrots, or as an animal, they might work harder. A donkey might be more productive, but I can give you too many carrots and you don't want to work anymore, or you're sick of carrots. Or the stick theory, you might beat you up or punish you, and you might behave better for a while, but that doesn't continue. So embrace theory, put theory right up front, is my advice if you're writing any academic papers from your thesis. Okay, I hope everyone can see that. And ultimately, there are only two types of PhD dissertation. If we go to that green cartoon, one kind of thesis is perfect, and that doesn't exist. And the other kind of thesis is the one you actually submit. So this is always work in progress. You can always improve on your PhD, but there comes a point when you have to submit. So linked to theory is the importance of argument. So like I've talked about this motivation theory of carrots and sticks, there's a relationship between your productivity and the carrot or the stick. So you have to discuss, what that relationship is, and at different stages. So your task, we've got a picture here of surviving your dissertation book. The authors say your task is to build an argument, not a library. You're not building a huge list of descriptions of the topic. You're joining somebody else's argument, debate. You're standing on the shoulders of giants, as we see on Google, and you're adding to that argument. So you need to edit, and not just write descriptions. So I did have a student the other week, gave me a methods chapter, which was just really a summary of a recipe book. If you made baked beans on toast last night, that was your method. When I ask you in a Viva, tell me about your method, I want you to explain how you made baked beans on toast. I don't want you to give me the whole story of what is qualitative method, interpretivist, pragmativist. I do not want a summary of the recipe book. How's the slides going? I did see them briefly. Do you want me to try my slides again, or do you want to try?
Try from your end one more time, if you don't mind, and our team is working on it.
Yeah, I did. Okay. All right. So theory is the outcome of theorizing, and theorizing is a process.
It's just to let you know, we see a blank screen. It's
oh dear. Okay. I'll let you do it. See if that works any better, and I'll continue.
Just let us know what number slide are you at.
Okay. Right. I think I am at 9. Just show 9 if you can.
Brilliant.
If that's all right. Okay, so 9 is showing this book, Surviving Your Dissertation, and hopefully enjoying it. And then my 10th slide will be linking it to the literature. So you need to know what's obviously been spoken about, the theory, the topic, what are the debates, the controversies, contradictions, inconsistencies, and any questions that haven't really been answered that you might like to address. So recently I've been looking at anthropology and sociology literature. There's a lot of talk about liminality and also this concept of liminoid. And liminoid has only been used in entrepreneurship in management literature. So I'm actually using it myself now because it's a theory that's well developed somewhere else, but not in the management literature. And there's fashions in theory. So at one point, great man theory was a fashion, trait theory was a fashion, and then the focus moved from leaders to leadership, and from leadership to followership and collective leadership. So you can see historically over time changes in what people find interesting about particular types of theory on a topic. So it's important for you, you can do a conceptual map, look at how perhaps, resource-based theory has developed over time. You can interrogate literature reviews like Human Resource Development Review, International Journal Management Reviews, Academy of Management Annals. They all have only literature reviews. And at the end of the literature review, they will say, this is the future of the theory. This is what we recommend people do more of X, Y, Z on this theory. And it's great for me as an examiner to somebody starting their abstract saying, this has been written about this theory and we're addressing some of the gaps. So questions for you are, what is the most relevant theory in your research? How does that shape your research question that underpins your research question? Are there opportunities for tweaking that slightly so that it's novel and you make a contribution? Other potential related theories? So it's good actually to integrate 2 or 3 key theories, and then how can you conceptualize your findings and make sense of them through these lenses that help you. So if it's a gender lens or an age lens or a strategy lens, you've got to find a room that you're in. If it's operations management, a discipline, marketing, and focus on your contribution to the conversations already there. So the way you build theory is you have a practical problem, a managerial problem. So in the workplace, for instance, recently, I've been looking at women's empowerment in India. There's a lot of talk by President Modi about Nari Shakti, women's empowerment. They want to be a developed country by 2047. How do you operationalize that in the workplace? Then you highlight the key theories, unpack the theories, what are the dimensions in the theory. So I'm using a theory actually from development studies, from Naila Kabir at London School of Economics. So she has a theory about resources, agency, and achievement. And I'm using her model from 1999, RAA, in 2026 in India and the UK to look at data about doctors. So I'm linking some theories from development economics to management. And then I'm looking at the context, particularly of my colleague at AIIMS Delhi, which is the top medical school in India, and trying to make sense of this and perhaps changing the words, unpicking the word empowerment. She used it for women who never had power, and then quite poor women. And we're looking at elite women who look like they have a lot of power, but actually in the workplace, they find they don't, and they start building their own enterprises and voluntary work because they realize they're not fulfilling their potential at work. And then finally, at the end, we've shown our work quite a few times. We showed our work on Monday to the MBA group. I also did a webinar the previous Saturday, and we're getting feedback that's refining our thinking. So I've had a few students at Ahlia who are like, oh, I'm a little bit scared to show my work to other people. And my argument, it's very important to have daylight and to tell as many people as you know about what you're doing, because you can get some very useful feedback potentially on your theorizing and your development and how you develop your angle. So good theories help you to explain a phenomenon. You know, why is Modi talking about women's empowerment when actually something crazy like India's in the bottom 18 in the world for women's equality. There's a huge informal economy. Very few people have formal employment. And he's talking about women-led empowerment, which sounds like, okay, just leave it to the women and they can empower themselves, which may not be very easy to operationalize in practice. You have to have systems and people monitoring policies. So every incident of sexual harassment that people mentioned in the interviews ended up unresolved. The women had to leave, they were the victim, or their promotion was blocked. So this policy of women's empowerment, there was no evidence in that respect of success on the ground. So how do you link the gap between policy and implementation is our challenge in that particular study. Okay, so theory is very useful to explain why things happen. Also very important to generalize. So your findings may be very interesting for Bahrain or Saudi Arabia or wherever your context is or a particular organization, but theories are very generalizable. So you should think about how they might be generalizable to other industry sectors or other parts of the world. In different contexts. So I have an example when you do see my slides at any point, if you get a chance to share them. There's a paper in Business and Society, and the editors, so often you'll see editors asking this question, what constitutes a theoretical contribution? And in this case, the contribution is to Business and Society, which is a new kind of subject, a new journal. So they look at some of these theories like contingency theory, which is about how things change depending on the context, the resource-based view, which is a very famous theory, institutional theory, social movements theory, and how maybe you've used these theories perhaps in strategy or human resource management, and now how you can use it to make sense of business and society, how businesses behave in society to do good, corporate good. So it's quite useful in your own discipline to see what editors of a key journal are saying about the development of theory. And the great thing is, things are changing hugely. So you can make a contribution in this world with AI and also socio-political changes. So I've given an example of an article from the British Journal of Management, which looks at generative AI in business and then what that means for strategic human resource management. So if you're studying human resource management and strategic human resource management, the world has changed significantly now that people are being interviewed by bots or, algorithms are just deciding who gets the job. Anyway, so if you're interested, you can see how they come up with a new model of doing strategic HRM in a different context. And their conclusion is you need to consider economic and societal changes. You need to look at multi-level approaches and multidisciplinarity. Okay, and then when you do get to my slides, the other thing I wanted to mention today is the Gioia method. So I've got an example of how you move from the raw data, what the person said to you, to various themes, to reducing it to 3 or 4 themes. So there's a very famous paper looking at the data structure and then how you theorize from that. And then I've got an example of the strengths and weaknesses. There have been papers about the limitations of this model. You're reducing a lot of data to very little themes, few themes, and how that can be a bit formulaic and artificial. So there's some debate about that. Then I've got an example of the current project we have that I just mentioned in India. We've interviewed these very senior women, got lots of data, and then again, we've reduced our data to 3 themes. And then I've got also an example of a previous study that we just published in Gender, Work and Organisation, looking at doctors, female doctors in India, and how in the paper again, we move from lots and lots of quotations to just summarizing really 3 points. So we found 3 types of women, some of whom prioritize their families and come back to serious medicine later, others who focus on just getting their heads down, and others who are quite unconventional. They start their own clinics. They're very keen to keep surgery as a specialism, even though they face lots of discrimination. And then we come up with a model of looking at the individual, the organization, and the big picture of the country in terms of looking at this theory. Okay, so that's what I was going to talk about with my slides. So hopefully you have access to my slides if you are interested in this methodology. And even if you are just doing, not qualitative methods, quantitative, highly statistical, still, I think theorizing and engagement with theory is really critical. Okay, so I think we have 2 minutes left. If there's any questions or comments anyone would like to ask, I'm happy to take them.